If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect on the power of resilience, love, and second chances. Together, we can celebrate the bonds that make life extraordinary. Amid the hustle of a sunny afternoon in downtown Riverton, the streets were alive with movement horns blared, pedestrians weaved through the crowd, and shop fronts bustled with life. Amid the chaos, a wiry black and white dog dashed through the throng, weaving between legs and skirting cars, its eyes wide and tail wagging with frantic urgency. Officer Emily Hayes, a dedicated member of Riverton's police force, stood on duty at the corner of Main and Park. She sipped her lukewarm coffee, her sharp gaze scanning the crowd. When the dog appeared out of nowhere, running directly toward her, she straightened instinctively. The animal skidded to a stop at her feet, barking frantically and tugging at her uniform with its teeth. "Whoa, easy there," Emily murmured, crouching down. Her hand extended in a calming gesture. "What's wrong, buddy?" The dog didn't calm. Instead, it barked louder, darted a few steps away, then turned back, as if pleading for her to follow. Emily's curiosity piqued. Years of training had taught her to trust her instincts, and something about the dog's frantic energy felt urgent, too purposeful to ignore. "All right," she said, standing and signaling to her partner in the patrol car nearby. "Keep an eye out. I'm following this one." The dog led her down a narrow alley behind a row of closed shops, the city's noise dulling with every step. Emily's boots crunched on gravel as the dog veered toward an old fenced-off warehouse, its structure skeletal and rusted. It stopped at a locked gate, barking insistently. Emily peered inside and froze. Through the gaps in the fence, she spotted a large duffel bag lying on the ground. Something about it didn't sit right. Her pulse quickened. "Stay here," she told the dog, unholstering her radio. "Dispatch. I need backup at 14th Thea and Broad. Possible suspicious package." Moments later, the quiet was shattered by sirens. Officers swarmed the scene, cordoning off the area, while Emily stood guard with the dog at her side. A bomb squad arrived, carefully assessing the duffel bag. Minutes felt like hours as they worked, and Emily couldn't take her eyes off the dog, now sitting silently, its eyes locked on her. When the all-clear was finally given, the officer in charge approached Emily with a small smile. "It wasn't a bomb," he said, "but it's something. Looks like stolen jewelry, likely from the bank robbery last week." Emily knelt beside the dog, scratching its ears. "Good job, buddy," she whispered. "You just cracked a case." In the days that followed, the story spread, earning the dog now named Scout a home with Emily and the gratitude of the entire city. Scout's instincts and courage reminded everyone that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, sometimes with wagging tails. The morning sun bathed the city in a golden hue, but inside the abandoned construction site, the atmosphere was anything but warm. Officer Emily Hayes followed the dog, now nicknamed Scout, through the rusted gate, her instincts on high alert. Scout's desperate barks and the faint trail of blood leading into the site told Emily she wasn't just chasing a stray dog's whim. Something was wrong. Emily moved cautiously, her hand resting on her holster. The skeletal beams of the half-built structure cast eerie shadows, and every creak of loose metal set her nerves on edge. Scout paused, turning to look back at her, his eyes pleading and full of urgency. "All right, Scout," Emily murmured. "Show me what you found." Scout darted toward a pile of wooden planks stacked precariously against a concrete wall. As Emily approached, she noticed something that made her breath catch, a small hand protruding from beneath the debris, barely visible in the dim light. Her heart raced. "Hello? Can you hear me?" she called, crouching beside the pile. The hand moved ever so slightly, a weak but undeniable sign of life. Emily's adrenaline surged as she grabbed her radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hayes. I need immediate backup and medical assistance at the abandoned construction site on 14th Thea and Main. Injured party trapped under debris." The radio crackled with a confirmation, but Emily couldn't wait. Time was critical. Carefully, she began to remove the lighter pieces of wood, mindful not to cause further harm. Scout paced nearby, his barking replaced by soft whimpers, his nervous energy mirroring her own urgency. As Emily worked, she uncovered a young boy no older than 8, his face pale and streaked with dirt. His eyes fluttered open, locking onto hers with a mixture of fear and relief. "You're safe now," Emily said, her voice calm but steady. "What's your name?" "Leo," the boy whispered, his voice barely audible. "Leo, I'm Officer Hayes. You're gonna be okay, I promise. Can you tell me what happened?" Tears welled in Leo's eyes, spilling over as he stammered, "The bad men, they were chasing me. I hid here, but the wood fell." Emily's chest tightened as the pieces fell into place. Whoever these bad men were, they had left a terrified child to fend for himself in this hazardous place. "You're very brave, Leo," she said, brushing dirt gently from his face. "Do you know where your parents are?" Leo shook his head, his small frame trembling. "I don't know," he whispered, the words carrying the weight of his fear and uncertainty. Emily fought to keep her emotions in check, offering a reassuring smile. "It's okay, Leo. We'll find them. You're not alone anymore." The distant sound of sirens grew louder, signaling that help was on the way. Scout sat quietly beside Leo now, his watchful eyes never leaving the boy. Emily placed a comforting hand on Scout's head, silently thanking the dog for leading her here. As backup arrived, Emily stayed by Leo's side, her determination stronger than ever. Whoever had done this wouldn't get away, not while she was on the case. The morning sun warmed the abandoned construction site as Officer Emily Hayes crouched beside young Leo, who was now being carefully lifted onto a stretcher by paramedics. Scout, the dog who had led Emily to the boy, barked sharply, drawing her attention to a nearby pile of rubble. Emily's instincts flared. Scout wasn't barking for no reason. "Stay with him," Emily instructed one of the paramedics, her voice steady despite the unease brewing in her chest. She approached the rubble, pushing aside a large sheet of corrugated metal. Beneath it, she found a small backpack. Inside were a few essential items, a water bottle, some snacks, and a notebook. Curious, Emily flipped through the notebook's pages. It contained childlike drawings of a family, a man, a woman, and a boy who unmistakably resembled Leo. The crude yet heartfelt sketches tugged at Emily's heart. On the final page, scrawled in shaky handwriting, was a phone number. Wasting no time, Emily dialed the number. After a few tense rings, a woman's voice answered, trembling with worry. "Hi, ma'am. This is Officer Emily Hayes with the City Police Department. We found your son, Leo. He's safe, but he's been through quite an ordeal." The woman let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank God. Is he okay? Where is he? Please tell me where I can find him." Emily quickly explained that Leo was being taken to City General Hospital for evaluation. "You can meet us there. He's in good hands." As Emily hung up, a wave of relief washed over her, but it was tempered by unease. Leo's earlier mention of bad men lingered in her mind. Who were they, and why would they chase a child? She looked down at Scout, who was watching her intently. "Good work, buddy," she said, scratching his head. Scout wagged his tail, his energy unwavering, as if he understood there was still more to do. The ambulance carrying Leo disappeared down the road, leaving Emily standing by her patrol car. The weight of the morning's events pressed heavily on her shoulders. Scout sat loyally at her feet, his sharp gaze fixed on her, mirroring her unease. Emily pulled out her notepad, jotting down every detail. Leo's description of the bad men, the makeshift supplies in his backpack, and the eerie setting of the abandoned construction site. It was clear to Emily that Leo hadn't just stumbled into danger, he had been running, prepared for a journey, likely in desperation to escape something sinister. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft whine from Scout. She knelt beside him, her hand resting on his head. "We're not done yet, are we?" she murmured. Scout's wagging tail seemed to signal agreement. Emily rose, her resolve hardening. The morning had started with a routine patrol, but it had turned into a case far more complex than she could have imagined. Whoever the bad men were, they weren't just a danger to Leo. They were still out there, and Emily was determined to find them. Officer Emily Hayes stood at the edge of the abandoned construction site, Scout by her side, the weight of unanswered questions pressing on her shoulders. Why was Leo running? And who were the men after him? Determined to uncover the truth, Emily decided to comb through the site once more. Scout, ever alert, trotted ahead, his nose to the ground as if he understood the urgency. The midday sun cast long shadows, making the skeletal framework of the site appear even more foreboding. Emily's fingers brushed against her holstered weapon as she advanced cautiously, her eyes scanning every corner. Scout's behavior became animated. He sniffed frantically, barking at seemingly random spots. Emily knew better than to dismiss his instincts. Near a pile of discarded bricks, something caught her eye. A piece of coarse, dark fabric snagged on a rusty nail. It looked like it could have come from a work jacket. Emily carefully bagged it for evidence, her mind racing. Whoever had been here wasn't being cautious. There were traces of their presence everywhere. Just as she stood to move on, her radio crackled. "Hayes, this is dispatch. The boy's mother has arrived at City General Hospital. She's asking for an update on his condition." Emily pressed the button on her radio. "Copy that. Is an officer securing the hospital?" "Affirmative. Officer Grant is stationed there." Relieved that Leo and his mother were in safe hands, Emily focused on the site again. She didn't want to leave until she was certain she hadn't missed anything. Scout barked sharply, pawing at the ground near a stack of wooden planks. Emily crouched beside him, brushing away the dirt and debris. Her hand closed around something metallic, a small, battered key with the number 312 etched into its surface. Frowning, Emily bagged the key alongside the fabric. It didn't appear to belong to any equipment on site. It looked more like it might open a storage unit or a lockbox. She noted it down, planning to follow up later. Scout barked again, this time facing the entrance to the site. Emily's pulse quickened as her gaze followed his. A figure stood in the distance, a man in dark clothes, his stance casual but unnervingly deliberate. Emily called out, "Can I help you?" Her hand rested on her belt, ready for anything. The man didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked away, disappearing behind a row of parked cars. Emily debated whether to follow, but decided to stay focused. She made a mental note of his appearance, medium height, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. Back at her patrol car, Emily reviewed the evidence she'd collected. The key and fabric scrap didn't tell her much yet, but they were pieces of a puzzle that was slowly coming together. Scout sat beside her, his ears alert and his gaze fixed on her, as if waiting for the next move. Emily's mind raced. The sight of the mysterious figure and the evidence in her possession hinted at something bigger than a frightened boy on the run. She resolved to find out what or who had driven Leo to that construction site. The uneasy feeling settled deeper in Officer Emily Hayes' chest as she pieced together the morning's events. The man at the construction site, the key leading to a mysterious storage unit, and now the sighting of Leo's pursuer near the hospital. It was all connected. Scout, her loyal canine companion, mirrored her tension, his ears twitching as he stayed alert near Leo's room. Emily knelt beside Scout, scratching behind his ears. "You saw him too, didn't you, buddy?" "Don't worry. We're going to get to the bottom of this." Scout wagged his tail slightly but remained focused on the hallway, his body language indicating he was ready for anything. Emily's thoughts churned as she made her way to the waiting room, where Leo's mother, Sarah Evans, sat nervously. "Mrs. Evans," Emily began, her tone firm but kind, "Leo just told me he saw someone watching him through the window. A man in a dark jacket and hat. Do you recognize this description?" Sarah's face paled, and her hands trembled as she clutched her coat tighter. "That sounds like one of them," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're the ones connected to my ex-husband. I thought we'd escaped, but they found us." Emily placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We're going to keep you and Leo safe. I promise." Stepping into the hallway, Emily grabbed her radio. "This is Hayes. We need more officers at City General immediately. A suspect has been spotted near the hospital, matching the description of one of the men pursuing Leo. Initiate a lockdown. No one gets in or out until the area is secure." The radio crackled as dispatch confirmed backup was on the way. Emily then turned to the hospital security guard. "Lock every entrance and monitor the exits. We can't take any chances." As the lockdown commenced, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a call from dispatch. "Officer Hayes, about the storage unit. Backup is en route, but initial reports suggest the unit may contain illegal materials. Proceed with caution. Emily's pulse quickened. She had to split her focus. Protecting Leo and investigating the storage unit were both critical. Copy that, she replied. Send a secondary team to Bayview Storage. I'll stay on site here. Back in Leo's room, Scout's behavior grew more intense. He paced back and forth, occasionally letting out low growls. Emily crouched beside him. What is it, boy? She whispered. Scout darted toward the window, his nose pressed against the glass. Emily followed his line of sight, but the street outside appeared empty. Still, Scout's instincts were rarely wrong. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed down the hallway, startling everyone. Emily's radio buzzed. Hayes, this is Officer Grant outside. We've detained someone in a dark jacket near the hospital parking lot. Awaiting instructions. Emily exhaled, her hand instinctively brushing Scout's fur. Good work. Keep him there until we can verify his connection to the case. She turned to Sarah and Leo, her voice steady. You're safe now. We have someone in custody, but I need you to stay here and stay alert. Scout sat at Emily's feet, his unwavering presence a reminder of the partnership that had brought them this far. As officers swarmed the hospital, Emily knew this was just the beginning. Whoever was after Leo wasn't going to stop easily, but neither would she. With Scout by her side and the pieces slowly coming together, Emily was determined to uncover the truth and ensure the safety of those who had come to her for protection. The weight of Sarah's question hung in the air, thick with fear and uncertainty. Officer Emily Hayes sat beside her, the gravity of the situation reflected in her furrowed brow. We don't know yet, Emily admitted, her voice steady but edged with tension. But it's clear they've been planning this for some time. They've been watching you, Leo, and even me. Sarah clutched Leo's hand tighter, her knuckles white. Why? Why us? She whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Emily sighed deeply, her mind racing through the possibilities. That's what we're going to find out. But first, we need to ensure your safety. Scout, the loyal dog who had become an unexpected ally, lay at Emily's feet, his ears perked and eyes scanning the room as if he too was on high alert. Emily reached down, scratching his head briefly. Good work, Scout. We're not done yet. The suspect Emily had apprehended at the storage unit remained silent during interrogation, his cold demeanor offering no hints about the operation. However, the evidence spoke volumes. The cash, passports, surveillance equipment, and weapons painted a chilling picture of a highly organized group with far-reaching motives. Emily stood outside the interrogation room, staring through the glass as her colleagues worked to crack the man's stone-cold silence. Her radio crackled to life. Hayes, we've got an update, came the voice of one of the officers who had stayed behind at the storage facility. The surveillance feeds had encrypted files. Our tech team's working on them now, but initial scans suggest they're tracking multiple individuals, not just Sarah and Leo. Emily's stomach turned. This was no isolated incident. Keep me updated, she replied before heading back to Sarah and Leo. In the hospital room, Sarah was comforting Leo, who had fallen into an uneasy sleep. Emily pulled Sarah aside, lowering her voice. We've discovered this is bigger than just you and Leo. They're tracking others too. We're trying to figure out who and why. Sarah's face went pale. But Leo, he's just a child. What could they want with him? Emily hesitated. It might be connected to your ex-husband, like you mentioned. Did he have any dealings with groups like this? Criminal organizations? Anything unusual? Sarah shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I don't know. He kept things from me, always said it was to protect us. But if this is because of him, her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Emily placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. Listen to me. We're going to protect you and Leo. We'll figure out their plan and stop them before they can harm anyone else. But I need you to stay strong. For Leo. Just then, Scout let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on the window. Emily's hand instinctively moved to her holstered weapon as she turned toward the source of Scout's unease. A shadow passed outside the hospital room's window, moving quickly and then disappearing. Emily's radio crackled again. Hayes, we've got movement near the hospital perimeter. Suspects matching the earlier description spotted. Emily's heart pounded. She glanced at Sarah, her voice firm. Stay here. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone but me or an officer you recognize. As Emily moved into the hallway, Scout stayed at her side. The hospital had become a fortress, officers stationed at every entrance, but the threat felt closer than ever. Emily signaled to her team to spread out and secure the area. The hunt wasn't over, and the stakes had never been higher. Scout's sharp instincts and the evidence they had uncovered gave Emily a lead, but the danger was escalating. Whoever these people were, they were relentless, and Emily was determined to be even more so. As the hospital settled into an uneasy silence, Emily's resolve hardened. She wasn't just protecting Sarah and Leo, she was standing against a network of criminals who thought they could operate in the shadows. But with Scout by her side and her team ready to act, Emily knew one thing for sure: they wouldn't get away with it. As the weight of the situation settled over her, Officer Emily Hayes felt the pieces slowly falling into place. The smuggling ring's persistence, the surveillance equipment, and Sarah's late husband's secrets all pointed to something bigger, something that could explain why Sarah and Leo were in constant danger. Scout, the loyal dog who had been pivotal throughout the case, paced restlessly near the hospital door, his ears perked up at every faint sound. Emily glanced at him and felt a surge of gratitude. "You're not letting anything slip past, are you, Scout?" she murmured. The dog stopped and met her gaze, his expressive eyes showing a mixture of determination and reassurance. Emily turned her attention back to Sarah, who was sitting beside Leo's hospital bed. The boy was pale but resting, his tiny hand clutching Scout's fur as if the dog were his lifeline. "Sarah," Emily began, her tone calm but firm, "I've sent a team to your old house to search for the safe. If it's still there, it might have the evidence we need to stop these people for good." Sarah nodded, her face pale and drawn. "I just don't understand why they won't leave us alone. I thought we left that part of our lives behind when my husband died." Emily crouched beside her, lowering her voice. "Sometimes, people like this see families as loose ends. They think you might know something or have access to something they want. But I promise you, we'll keep you and Leo safe." Just then, Emily's phone buzzed with an update. It was from the team she'd sent to the house. "Safe located. It's intact, but locked." Bringing it back to HQ for analysis. Relief swept through her. At least they were making progress. As Emily relayed the news to Sarah, the atmosphere in the hospital seemed to shift. The quiet tension thickened, and Scout let out a low growl, his eyes fixed on the hallway outside. Emily immediately tensed, her instincts kicking in. She stepped into the hallway, scanning her surroundings, her hand resting on the holster at her side. The hallway was quiet, but something felt off. Emily's radio crackled, and a voice came through. "Hayes, we've spotted movement near the hospital's south entrance. Unidentified individuals matching the description of the suspects." Emily's stomach clenched. They were here. She returned to Sarah's room, her tone urgent but calm. "Sarah, I need you to stay here with Leo and keep the door locked. Don't open it for anyone except me or another officer. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded, fear evident in her eyes. Emily gave Scout a quick pat on the head. "Stay here and protect them, boy," she said. Scout barked softly, settling himself at the foot of Leo's bed, his body a protective shield. Emily moved swiftly through the hospital, coordinating with the officers stationed throughout the building. The suspects were trying to get in, and it was only a matter of time before they made their move. She radioed her team at the house to expedite their return with the safe. Whatever was inside could be the key to ending this nightmare. Near the south entrance, Emily caught sight of a shadow moving across the glass doors. She signaled to the officers nearby, who took their positions. The suspects stepped into view, a man in a dark jacket, his face partially obscured. He seemed to hesitate, then gestured to someone outside. Emily's heart raced. "Hold your positions," she whispered into her radio. She needed them to act at the right moment to avoid endangering the hospital's patients and staff. The suspect stepped closer, pulling out a crowbar to jimmy the lock. Emily didn't wait. "Police, freeze!" she shouted, her voice echoing through the hall. The man froze for a split second before bolting back outside. Emily and her team gave chase, their footsteps pounding against the polished floors. Outside, chaos erupted. Two more suspects emerged from the shadows, but the officers quickly intercepted them. Scout, as if sensing the commotion, bolted from the hospital room and joined the pursuit. His powerful strides closed the gap between Emily and the fleeing suspect, and he lunged, grabbing the man's sleeve and bringing him to the ground. Emily quickly cuffed the man, her breath coming in gasps. "You're done," she said, her voice cold. The suspect scowled but said nothing. Back inside, Sarah peeked out from the room, relief washing over her as she saw Emily returning with Scout at her side. "Are we safe now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emily gave her a small smile. "For now. But we're not stopping until we've dismantled this entire operation." Hours later, the safe was opened at HQ, revealing documents, ledgers, and a hard drive evidence of the smuggling ring's operations and connections. Emily's team now had the tools to bring them down. As she returned to the hospital, she looked at Scout, who walked proudly beside her. "We're almost there," she said. "Thanks to you." Scout barked, his tail wagging as if to say, "We've got this." Together, they would ensure that Sarah and Leo's nightmare ended for good. As the blaring alarm echoed through the hospital's sterile hallways, Officer Emily Hayes moved quickly, her weapon drawn, scanning the area with sharp precision. Scout was at her side, his tail stiff and ears alert. The dog's growl reverberated low in his chest, a sound that sent shivers down the spines of the hospital staff huddled nearby. "Did they get inside?" Emily repeated, her voice firm but steady. The officer nearest her shook his head. "Not yet. Security caught them on the cameras just before they could breach the loading dock. They fled into the parking lot." Emily's jaw tightened. "Seal off the perimeter. Nobody gets in or out without clearance." Scout barked sharply, pulling Emily's attention toward the East Wing's hallway. He strained against his leash, nose to the ground, as if tracking something unseen. Emily trusted the dog's instincts implicitly. "Scout's onto something," she said to the officer. "Stay here and secure the area." "I'm following him." As Scout led Emily down the corridor, the dog's focus never wavered. They reached a fire exit door where the faint smell of gasoline and rubber lingered in the air. Scout scratched at the base of the door, whining softly. Emily pushed it open cautiously, revealing a narrow alley at the hospital's rear. In the distance, the silhouette of a figure darting into the shadows caught her eye. "Stop! Police!" she shouted, but the figure didn't slow. Emily gave chase, Scout sprinting ahead with remarkable speed. The pursuit led her into the maze-like back streets surrounding the hospital. Scout stayed close on the trail, barking furiously as the suspect attempted to scale a fence. With a powerful leap, Scout grabbed hold of the man's pant leg, dragging him back to the ground. Emily closed the distance quickly, pinning the suspect and cuffing him in one swift motion. "You've got a lot of explaining to do," she said, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Back at the hospital, the suspect was placed in a secure interrogation room while Emily returned to Sarah and Leo. The boy had woken up during the commotion, his frightened eyes scanning the room for Emily. "Are we okay?" Leo asked, his small voice trembling. Emily knelt by his bedside, brushing a hand over Scout's head as the dog leaned protectively against Leo. "We're okay," she assured him. "Scout and I made sure of it." Sarah's hands trembled as she held onto Leo. "Is it ever gonna stop?" she asked Emily, her voice breaking under the weight of fear. Emily's expression softened, but her determination remained unwavering. "It will stop. I promise you, Sarah. We're closing in on them, and they won't get near you or Leo again." Later that night, Emily reviewed the evidence from the latest breach attempt. The suspect they'd captured wasn't talking, but his presence confirmed what Emily feared. This group wasn't giving up. She connected the dots between the storage unit, Sarah's late husband, and the smuggling operation. Whatever the group wanted, it had to be in that safe. An officer entered the room holding up a phone. "Emily, the team at the house found the safe. It's intact, but it's going to take some time to crack it." Emily nodded, a sense of urgency bubbling beneath her calm exterior. "Tell them to expedite it. We need answers now." As the hospital settled back into uneasy silence, Emily sat outside Sarah and Leo's room, Scout curled at her feet. The dog's steady breathing was a rare moment of calm in the chaos. She stroked his fur absently, her mind racing with strategies to stay ahead of the smuggling ring. The next morning, the safe was finally opened. Inside were documents, detailed ledgers, and photographs that revealed the full extent of the smuggling ring's operations and the role Sarah's late husband had played before trying to escape their grip. The evidence also included a map marked with several locations, one of which was disturbingly close to the hospital. Emily's phone buzzed with a message from the precinct. "We've got enough to shut them down. Mobilizing units now." Relief washed over her, but Emily knew the job wasn't done. She returned to the hospital, where Sarah and Leo were preparing to leave under heavy police escort. Emily crouched beside Leo, offering him a small smile. "You've been incredibly brave, Leo. We're going to make sure you and your mom are safe from now on." Leo hugged Scout tightly, tears brimming in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice muffled against Scout's fur. As the family was escorted to safety, Emily stood with Scout by her side, watching them leave. She knew the battle against the smuggling ring was far from over, but for now, she had given Sarah and Leo what they needed most, a chance to reclaim their lives. Emily looked down at Scout, who wagged his tail and nuzzled her hand. "We've still got work to do, buddy," she said, her voice steady with resolve. Together, they turned back toward the precinct, ready to finish what they had started. As Officer Emily Hayes sat beside Sarah in the dimly lit hospital room, she watched the tears well up in the woman's eyes. Sarah gripped the armrests of her chair tightly, her knuckles white as she struggled to process the weight of Emily's words. "He wanted to protect us," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "He must have known they'd come after us if he left. That's why he never told me." Emily placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. "He made a difficult choice, Sarah. He tried to do the right thing, but now it's up to us to make sure you and Leo are safe." Across the room, Leo sat on the hospital bed, gently petting Shadow, the dog who had become his steadfast protector. The bond between the boy and the dog was unshakable, Shadow's loyalty evident in every movement. Leo looked up at Emily, his wide eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "Officer Hayes," he said softly, "are the bad men going to come back?" Emily crouched down to his level, meeting his gaze with a steady, confident expression. "Leo, we're doing everything we can to make sure they don't. Shadow and I are here to protect you, and so is every officer in this hospital. You're not alone in this." Shadow wagged his tail gently, leaning against Leo as if to affirm Emily's promise. The boy nodded, his fingers brushing through the dog's fur for comfort. Meanwhile, back at the precinct, the evidence from the safe was being examined meticulously. The ledger, filled with detailed transactions, painted a damning picture of the smuggling ring. Names, dates, and locations tied the operation to a web of international criminals. It was clear that Sarah's late husband had been a key player before his attempt to escape. Emily's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Ramirez, his voice urgent. "Emily, we've identified a few names from the ledger. One of them is in custody on unrelated charges downtown. I think we need to have a conversation with him." Emily stood, her resolve hardening. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Keep him locked down." She turned to Sarah. "We're making progress, but I need to step out for a while. Officers will be stationed here, and I'll check in regularly. If anything happens, you call me immediately." Sarah nodded, her grip on Leo tightening. "Thank you, Officer Hayes." As Emily left the hospital, Shadow trotted to the door, looking back at Leo as if reluctant to leave. "It's okay, Shadow," Emily said with a small smile. "You stay here and look after them." Arriving at the downtown precinct, Emily entered the interrogation room where Ramirez waited. The suspect, a wiry man with a cold smirk, sat across the table, his arms crossed. Emily placed the ledger on the table with a firm thud. "Recognize this?" she asked, her tone sharp. The man's smirk faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Never seen it before." Emily leaned in, her eyes narrowing. "We have evidence linking you to an international smuggling ring. If you cooperate, we can talk about reducing your sentence. If not, this ledger will bury you." The man's confidence cracked, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "I don't know much," he stammered, "but they don't let anyone leave. If her husband tried to back out, they'd see it as a betrayal. Emily's voice softened slightly. Why are they after Sarah and Leo? What do they think she has? The man hesitated, then whispered, he was supposed to deliver something important before he disappeared. They think she knows where it is. Emily's heart sank. The smuggling ring wasn't just after revenge. They believed Sarah had something valuable, something they were willing to do anything to retrieve. She stepped out of the room, her mind racing. The stakes were higher than ever. If the group thought Sarah held a critical piece of their operation, they wouldn't stop until they got it. Emily returned to the hospital that evening, the weight of her findings pressing heavily on her. She pulled Sarah aside, her voice low. They're not just after you because of your husband. They believe he left something behind, something they want. Sarah's eyes widened. What could it be? I don't know anything. We'll figure it out, Emily assured her. But for now, we need to stay vigilant. As the night deepened, Emily sat outside Leo's room, her hand resting on Shadow's head. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, his alertness matching Emily's own. Together, they kept watch, ready for whatever the darkness might bring. The tension in the car thickened as Officer Emily Hayes absorbed the news. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, scanning the road behind them. Stay close, but don't engage, she said into her radio, her voice calm but firm. We'll lead them away from the safe house. Sarah clutched Leo's hand tightly, her knuckles white. Shadow, sensing the unease, let out a low growl, his body tense as he pressed closer to Leo. Is it them? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. It might be, Emily admitted, glancing at her. But we're prepared. Just stay calm and trust me. The black SUV maintained its distance, but was clearly following them. Emily signaled to the lead decoy vehicle. Take the next turn and slow down. Let's see if they bite. The lead vehicle obeyed, turning down a side street and reducing speed. For a moment, the SUV hesitated, its dark silhouette hovering at the intersection. Then, it followed the decoy. Emily exhaled softly. They're on the decoy, she said into the radio. Keep them occupied, but don't engage unless necessary. We're proceeding to the safe house. The officers in the decoy car acknowledged, leading the black SUV further away. Emily kept her focus on the road, her grip steady on the wheel. We're clear for now, she said, casting a reassuring glance at Sarah and Leo. But the relief was short-lived. Another vehicle, a white van, appeared behind them, speeding up to close the gap. Emily's instincts flared. We've got a second tail, she said into the radio. All units, converge on our location. The van accelerated, its engine roaring as it drew closer. Emily tightened her grip on the wheel. Hold on, she warned, swerving sharply onto a side road. Sarah gasped, clutching Leo and Shadow as the vehicle jolted. The van followed relentlessly, its driver clearly determined. Emily's training kicked in as she maneuvered the car through tight turns, trying to lose the pursuer. They're persistent, she muttered, glancing at the road ahead. Suddenly, the van surged forward, attempting to ram them. Emily swerved just in time, narrowly avoiding the collision. Hang on, she shouted, flooring the gas pedal. The safe house was close, but the van showed no signs of letting up. In the back seat, Leo clung to Shadow, his face pale but determined. Scout will protect us, right? He asked, his voice small. Shadow barked sharply, his body braced as if ready for action. Emily glanced at them through the rearview mirror. Scout and I will both protect you, she said firmly. No one's getting past us. The radio crackled to life. This is Unit 2. We're closing in on your location, an officer reported. Good, Emily replied. Box them in when you can. We're almost to the safe house. As they approached a narrow bridge, Emily spotted an opportunity. Hold tight, she warned, slamming on the brakes and veering sharply to the side. The van, unable to react in time, sped past them, its tires screeching as it tried to stop. The convoy regrouped quickly, with unmarked police vehicles surrounding the van, blocking its escape. Officers leapt out, weapons drawn. Step out of the vehicle, one shouted. Inside Emily's car, Sarah let out a shaky breath, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Leo tightly. Is it over? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded, watching as the suspects in the van were apprehended. For now, yes. You're safe. Shadow barked again, his tail wagging slightly as if sensing the danger had passed. Leo buried his face in the dog's fur, his small body trembling. Thank you, he whispered, his words meant for both Scout and Emily. The convoy resumed its journey, finally reaching the safe house, a secluded, heavily guarded location surrounded by tall fences and patrolled by armed officers. Emily escorted Sarah, Leo, and Shadow inside, ensuring they were settled before stepping outside to debrief with her team. We've got the suspects in custody, one officer reported. Preliminary search of the van shows surveillance equipment and weapons. Emily's jaw tightened. This confirms they were planning an attack. Make sure they're questioned thoroughly. As the sun rose higher, casting light on the events of the morning, Emily took a moment to check on Sarah and Leo. Inside the safe house, Sarah sat with Leo, who was laughing softly as Shadow licked his face. The sight warmed Emily's heart, even as her mind remained focused on the danger that still loomed. Emily, Sarah said, her voice filled with gratitude. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to, Emily replied. We're not done yet, but we'll get through this together. Shadow trotted over to Emily, his tail wagging. She knelt to scratch behind his ears. Good job, Scout. Couldn't have done it without you. As the day unfolded, Emily vowed to dismantle the smuggling ring and ensure Sarah and Leo's safety. The fight wasn't over, but with Shadow by her side and her team's unwavering dedication, she knew they had a fighting chance. The atmosphere in the safe house was thick with tension, every creak of the wooden floorboard seeming louder than usual. Officer Emily Hayes knelt beside Sarah, her voice calm but resolute. They're relentless, but so are we. I promise you, Sarah, we're not letting them get anywhere near you or Leo. Sarah nodded, her grip on the coffee mug tightening. Thank you, she whispered, her voice cracking. Leo leaned against her, his small hand clutching Shadow's fur as the dog's head rested protectively on the boy's lap. Emily glanced out the window, the dense trees casting long shadows under the moonlight. Outside, officers patrolled with quiet precision, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. She knew the smuggling ring wouldn't give up easily, but she had to believe her team was ready for whatever came next. Leo, Emily said softly, crouching to his level, how are you holding up, buddy? The boy looked up at her, his wide eyes reflecting both fear and trust. Will they come here? He asked hesitantly. Emily shook her head, her tone firm. We've got the best team here protecting you. Shadow and I won't let anything happen to you. Shadow barked softly, almost as if to echo Emily's promise. The sound brought a small, fleeting smile to Leo's face, a glimmer of hope in an otherwise grim situation. Just then, Emily's radio crackled. Hayes, we've got movement on the south perimeter. Could be wildlife, but we're checking it out. Emily stood, her jaw tightening. Copy that. Stay alert. I'm coming to check. Sarah's face paled. Is it them? It might be nothing, Emily reassured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Just stay here. Lock the door behind me and don't open it unless it's me or someone from my team. Sarah nodded, pulling Leo closer as Emily slipped out of the cabin. The cold night air hit her immediately, the forest silent except for the crunch of leaves underfoot. She moved toward the south perimeter, her flashlight slicing through the shadows. Two officers stood near the tree line, their expressions tense. We saw movement, one of them said, pointing to a cluster of bushes that rustled faintly. Could be an animal, but... Emily nodded, her hand resting on her holstered weapon. Let's check it out. As they approached the bushes, Shadow appeared by Emily's side, his body low and his nose to the ground. His sudden presence startled the officers, but Emily motioned for them to stay quiet. Shadow sniffed the air, his tail stiff, and let out a low growl. Something's there, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She signaled for the officers to fan out, their movements slow and deliberate. Suddenly, a figure bolted from the bushes, sprinting toward the trees. Stop, police! Emily shouted, taking off after them. Shadow barked and surged forward, his powerful strides closing the gap between him and the fleeing suspect. The chase was chaotic, weaving through the dense forest. Emily's adrenaline spiked as Shadow lunged, grabbing the suspect's arm and bringing him down. Emily closed the distance, cuffing the man as the other officers arrived to assist. "Who sent you?" Emily demanded, her voice sharp. The man glared at her but said nothing, his silence only confirming her suspicions. They dragged the suspect back to the safe house, securing him in one of the patrol cars stationed nearby. Inside, Sarah and Leo watched from the window, their faces pale but their eyes filled with relief as they saw Emily and Shadow returning. Emily entered the cabin, her breath visible in the cold air. "We got one of them," she said, her tone steady. "He's not talking yet, but it's a start." Sarah let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling. "Does this mean it's over?" Emily shook her head. "Not yet. These people don't back down easily. But we're getting closer to stopping them." Leo looked up at Emily, his voice small but determined. "You'll stop them, right?" Emily crouched down, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I will. And so will Shadow." The boy smiled faintly, his trust in Emily unwavering. Shadow let out a soft bark, wagging his tail as if to confirm Emily's promise. As the night wore on, the safe house remained on high alert. Officers rotated shifts, patrolling the perimeter, while Emily worked tirelessly with her team to piece together the puzzle. The capture of one suspect was a small victory, but Emily knew the fight was far from over. Sitting by the fireplace, Sarah watched Leo and Shadow curled up together on the couch, the boy finally dozing off. She glanced at Emily, her eyes filled with gratitude and worry. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." Emily nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "We're going to end this, Sarah. You and Leo deserve a life free from fear, and we're going to make sure you get it." The warmth of the fire illuminated their faces, casting shadows that danced on the walls. But in that moment, hope began to replace the fear that had gripped them for so long. The tension in the safe house was palpable as Officer Emily Hayes prepared for the warehouse raid. The quiet resolve in her demeanor radiated through the small space, grounding those around her. Shadow sat by her side, his eyes tracking her every move, as if he knew this mission would be critical. The dog's presence brought a small but vital reassurance to Sarah and Leo, who clung to each other in the adjacent room. In the living area, Sarah tried to keep Leo calm, reading him a book despite her trembling hands. Leo was holding Shadow's paw like a lifeline. "Mom, do you think Karen will be okay?" he asked, his voice small but filled with hope. Sarah forced a smile, smoothing his hair. "Karen's smart, and she has a great team. They'll be okay." Leo looked down at Shadow. "And we have you here, right, boy?" Shadow barked softly, wagging his tail, and Leo finally smiled, if only for a moment. In the cramped kitchen, Emily addressed her team. The map of the industrial district was spread across the table, red circles marking possible locations connected to the broker. "This warehouse is our best lead," she said, her tone steady but urgent. "If the broker's operation is as extensive as we think, this could be where they're coordinating everything." Jensen, the burly officer, crossed his arms. "And if they're expecting us?" Emily didn't hesitate. "We'll adapt. The priority is gathering intel that will dismantle this network. We'll move swiftly and methodically. But remember, this operation isn't just about taking down a smuggling ring. It's about ensuring Sarah and Leo can live without fear." The team nodded, their determination clear. Emily turned to Sarah, who had quietly entered the room. "I need you to stay here with Leo and trust the officers on duty. We're taking every precaution." Sarah's eyes filled with worry. "And what about you? This is dangerous." Emily placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "We'll be careful. And when we get back, I want to give you good news." Before Emily left, she knelt beside Leo. "I need you to be brave while I'm gone. Stick close to your mom and Shadow, okay?" Leo nodded solemnly. "Be safe, Karen." With a faint smile, Emily straightened, her resolve hardening. She and her team departed as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. The industrial district was eerily quiet when Emily's team arrived. The warehouse loomed like a fortress, its metal walls catching the faint light of the rising sun. Officers moved into position, their footsteps silent against the cracked pavement. Emily gave the signal, and the team advanced. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of crates, machinery, and dimly lit corridors. The air was thick with the scent of oil and dust. Shadowing her steps, Emily's flashlight swept the space, illuminating abandoned desks, stacks of paper, and empty shipping containers. "This place feels deserted," Jensen muttered, his voice low. Emily's eyes narrowed. "Stay alert. If the broker is running an operation here, they wouldn't leave it undefended." A sudden noise echoed from the far side of the warehouse. The team froze, weapons drawn. Emily gestured silently, and they moved toward the sound. As they rounded a corner, they spotted a man hunched over a desk, frantically gathering papers. "Police! Hands up!" Emily shouted. The man froze, his eyes darting toward a nearby exit. But before he could move, 2 officers intercepted him. Emily approached, her voice sharp. "Where's the broker?" The man smirked, his defiance clear. "You're too late. He's already gone." Emily's jaw tightened. "We'll see about that." A search of the warehouse revealed several encrypted hard drives, stacks of documents, and a shipping manifest detailing locations across the state. It wasn't the broker himself, but it was enough to begin dismantling his operation piece by piece. Back at the safe house, Sarah and Leo waited anxiously. Shadow paced near the door, his ears perked at every sound. When Emily returned, her face weary but determined, Sarah exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "We found enough evidence to cripple the operation," Emily said. "The broker wasn't there, but this is a step forward." Sarah hugged her tightly. "Thank you." Leo ran up, Shadow bounding after him. "Did you get the bad guys?" Emily crouched to his level, a soft smile breaking through her exhaustion. "We're getting closer, Leo. You and your mom are going to be safe soon. I promise." Shadow barked, and for the first time in days, hope filled the room. Though the fight wasn't over, Emily knew they were on the right path. Together, they would see it through. Sarah's voice trembled as she clutched Leo tightly, trying to mask her fear. "Do you think they found us?" she asked, her eyes darting between the officer and the door. Shadow's barking grew louder, the dog standing protectively between the door and Sarah, his posture tense and his ears pinned back. The officer nodded, his expression grim. "It's possible, but we're ready for them. Just stay calm and stay inside." Shadow let out a low growl, his sharp eyes fixed on the window. Sarah glanced at the curtain, catching a fleeting shadow moving through the trees. Her heart pounded, the unease in the room thick enough to choke on. She turned to Leo, forcing a smile. "It's gonna be okay, sweetheart. We have people protecting us." Leo nodded, though his small hands clung tightly to Shadow's fur. "Shadow will keep us safe," he said, his voice trembling but hopeful. Meanwhile, at the warehouse, Officer Emily Hayes gritted her teeth as the broker's voice taunted them through the speakers. "You've gone too far, Detective Hayes. This isn't just a case, it's war, and you're on the losing side." Emily ignored the taunts, signaling her team to stay focused. The tech specialist was furiously typing, transferring files as quickly as possible. "Almost there," he said, sweat beading on his forehead. Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Emily signaled for her team to prepare, her weapon drawn. Out of the shadows emerged several masked men, armed and ready. "Contact!" one of the officers shouted. The room erupted in chaos. Emily ducked behind a stack of crates, firing at the intruders as her team moved to flank them. The tech specialist yelled over the commotion, "Transfer's complete!" Emily barked into her radio, "Fall back! We've got what we need. Secure the files and regroup." Back at the safe house, the tension escalated as the officer at the door peered through a crack in the blinds. "They're moving closer," he muttered, reaching for his radio. "HQ, we've got confirmed movement near the safe house. Requesting immediate backup." Sarah's breath hitched as the officer moved to reinforce the door. "What do we do if they get in?" she whispered, clutching Leo tightly. The officer glanced back, his face set with determination. "They won't." Shadow growled again, his body low to the ground, every muscle poised to defend. The sound of snapping twigs outside sent Sarah's heart racing. She whispered to Leo, Stay quiet and don't let go of Shadow no matter what. The minutes dragged on like hours, until the distant sound of sirens pierced the tense silence. Backup had arrived. The officer outside straightened, his posture relaxing slightly. "Stay here," he said, stepping onto the porch to meet the arriving reinforcements. The tension began to ease, but Shadow's ears remained perked, his growls only slightly quieter. Sarah watched the officer through the window as he coordinated with the incoming units, relief washing over her. For now, they were safe. At the warehouse, Emily's team regrouped outside with the retrieved files. Her pulse still raced from the firefight, but her focus was sharp. "We've got enough to dismantle this network," she said, her voice firm. "We're bringing them down." As they loaded the evidence into their vehicles, Emily's phone buzzed. It was the officer at the safe house. "They made a move, but reinforcements are on site. Sarah and Leo are safe." Emily exhaled, relief mingled with determination. "Good. Stay on high alert. This isn't over yet." With her team ready to head back, Emily looked at the warehouse one last time, a steely resolve in her eyes. The broker had made it personal, but she wasn't backing down. Not until Sarah, Leo, and every other victim of this operation could sleep soundly. Back at the safe house, Shadow lay protectively at Leo's feet, his watchful gaze never leaving the door. Sarah stroked his fur, her heart still pounding but filled with gratitude. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a small glimmer of hope. In the suffocating darkness of the warehouse, Officer Emily Hayes felt her heart pound with urgency as Sarah's cry for help echoed in her mind. "Team, we're pulling out," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. The tech specialist shut down the computer, yanking the drive with whatever files had been downloaded. Emily turned to her officers, her flashlight slicing through the gloom. "Fall back to the vehicles. We have civilians in immediate danger." Shots rang out as her team retreated under cover fire. Emily's focus never wavered, her instincts sharpening with every passing second. The broker's voice crackled mockingly over the speakers one last time. "Run, detective, but you're already too late." Emily clenched her jaw, refusing to let the taunt shake her resolve. "We'll see about that," she muttered before leading her team out of the warehouse and into the night. At the safe house, chaos had erupted. Shadow, despite the brutal kick, was relentless. The loyal dog lunged at another intruder, his teeth sinking into the man's arm and forcing him back. Sarah, clutching Leo tightly behind the couch, whispered frantically, "Stay still, sweetheart. Don't move." The officer on duty, bloodied but determined, managed to knock one of the intruders unconscious. However, the others pressed forward with unnerving precision. One of them spotted Sarah and Leo behind the couch and advanced toward them. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, but Shadow launched himself at the man, buying her a precious few seconds. In a desperate bid, Sarah scrambled to retrieve her phone, praying Karen had heard her plea. Emily's convoy raced toward the safe house, the urgency in the air palpable. Sarah's call cut off. "We don't know what we're walking into," Emily said into her radio. "Be prepared for anything." As they neared the wooded area surrounding the cabin, they killed their sirens to avoid alerting the attackers. The dark forest seemed to close in around them, and Emily's grip on her weapon tightened. "Scout, stay close," she said to the dog, who'd become a vital part of their team. When the convoy reached the safe house, the scene was chaos. The front door hung off its hinges, and the sounds of struggle emanated from within. Emily didn't hesitate. "Move, now," she ordered her team. Inside, Sarah screamed as an intruder grabbed her arm. Leo cried out, clinging to her desperately. Shadow, bloodied but undeterred, growled and snapped at their assailants. The officer on duty, though injured, refused to back down, grappling with another masked figure. Emily and her team burst through the broken door, their weapons drawn. "Police, drop your weapons." Emily's voice was ice cold, cutting through the chaos. The intruders froze for a fraction of a second, long enough for Emily and her team to act. Shots were fired, precise and deliberate, as they subdued the attackers one by one. Shadow growled at the last intruder, who was backing away toward a window. Emily raised her weapon. "Don't move," she commanded. The man hesitated before making a desperate dash. Shadow leaped, knocking him to the ground and pinning him until Emily cuffed him. The safe house was finally silent, except for the heavy breathing of the survivors. Sarah held Leo tightly, tears streaming down her face as she murmured words of comfort. Shadow, exhausted and limping, laid his head on Leo's lap, his tail wagging faintly. Emily crouched beside them, her face softening. "You're safe now," she said gently. "It's over." Sarah looked at her with gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to repay you." Emily glanced at Leo, who was stroking Shadow's fur with trembling hands. "You don't have to," she said. "Keeping you both safe is all that matters." As her team secured the scene and called for reinforcements, Emily stepped outside to catch her breath. The stars above were bright, the air crisp, but the weight of the night hung heavily on her shoulders. She knew the fight wasn't over. The broker was still out there, and his network remained a threat. But for now, Sarah and Leo were safe, thanks to Shadow's bravery and her team's determination. Emily glanced back at the cabin, her resolve hardening. "We're not done yet," she murmured to herself. "This ends when the broker is behind bars." The air in the safe house was heavy with the aftermath of the attack. Officer Emily Hayes stood in the dimly lit living room, her gaze moving between Sarah, Leo, and Shadow. The loyal dog, still limping from his brave defense, lay by Leo's feet, his eyes following Emily's every move as if waiting for her next command. The once cozy space now felt like a battleground, a reminder of how close they had come to tragedy. Emily knelt in front of Leo, her voice soft but steady. "Leo, you were incredibly brave today. I know it was scary, but you did so well." The boy clung tightly to his mother, his small hands gripping her shirt. "I was so scared," he whispered, his voice trembling. Emily placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to be scared anymore. We're here to protect you, all of us, including Scout." She glanced at the dog, giving him a soft scratch behind the ears. "And you," she added, "you're a hero too." Sarah's voice broke through the quiet. "If it weren't for Shadow, I don't know what would have happened." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she hugged Leo closer. Outside, the scene was alive with activity. Officers secured the area, and the subdued intruder was escorted to a patrol car. Emily stepped out, her expression hard as she approached the man. She needed answers, and she needed them now. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Was it the broker?" The man, bloodied but defiant, smirked at her. "You think you've won, detective?" he sneered. "You've only made yourself a bigger target." Emily's jaw tightened. "You'll talk," she said coldly. "Whether it's here or in a cell, you're going to tell me everything." The man leaned in, his voice low and chilling. "You don't know what you're dealing with. This is bigger than you. Bigger than all of you." Frustration burned through Emily as she stormed back inside. She found her tech specialist, who had arrived with the stolen drive from the warehouse. "Do we have anything from the files yet?" she asked, her tone clipped. The specialist nodded, his expression grim. "We've uncovered some details about the broker's operation accounts, contacts, potential locations." "It's big, Emily." But what?" Emily pressed, her patience wearing thin. "The files are encrypted," the specialist admitted. "It'll take time to decode everything." Emily sighed, running a hand through her hair. Time was a luxury they didn't have, not when the broker's people were closing in. Back in the living room, Sarah approached Emily, her face pale but determined. "What's our next move?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear she had to be feeling. Emily hesitated. She admired Sarah's courage, but the risks were undeniable. "You and Leo need to be relocated," she said finally. "It's not safe here." Sarah shook her head, her resolve unshaken. "We're not running again," she said firmly. "This ends now." Emily looked at her, weighing the words. "It will," she promised. "But we can't afford to lose you or Leo in the process. Let us handle this. We'll take the fight to them." Sarah's eyes softened, but the determination didn't waver. "Just promise me, Emily. Promise me you'll end this." Emily nodded, her own resolve hardening. "I will," she said, "no matter what it takes." As the night deepened, Emily knew the battle wasn't over. The broker's network was vast, and their enemies were relentless. But as she looked at Sarah, Leo, and Shadow, each of them embodying resilience in their own way, she felt her determination solidify. They would end this, together. The warehouse fell silent as the broker, now in handcuffs, was escorted out by officers. His smirk never faded, even as he was led away. Officer Emily Hayes stood amidst the chaos, her heart pounding as she stared at the briefcase filled with encrypted files. This was their breakthrough, but the broker's chilling words still echoed in her mind. There's always someone else. Sarah, who had insisted on coming along, emerged from behind the safety of a nearby crate. Her face was pale but resolute. "Did we get him?" she asked, her voice trembling. Emily nodded, though her expression remained cautious. "We've got him, but this isn't over. The files in this briefcase could unravel the entire operation or reveal just how far this network reaches." Sarah glanced at the briefcase, her eyes flickering with a mix of relief and fear. "What happens now?" Emily placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Now we follow every lead, decode every file, and make sure no one else has to go through what you and Leo did." As the team wrapped up the operation, the tension in the air gave way to a cautious optimism. Sarah stayed close to Emily, her trust in the detective unwavering. Scout, ever vigilant, stood at Sarah's side, his tail wagging faintly as if sensing they had taken a significant step forward. Back at the precinct, the mood was tense but hopeful. The broker was placed in an interrogation room, his smirk gone but his silence unwavering. Emily knew it would take more than threats to get him to talk. The files in the briefcase would be their best chance at dismantling the network. In the conference room, the tech team worked tirelessly to decrypt the files. Emily, Sarah, and Leo sat nearby, waiting for any updates. Leo leaned against Scout, his small fingers running through the dog's fur for comfort. "Is it really over?" Leo asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily crouched beside him, her tone gentle but honest. "Not yet, Leo. But we're getting closer. You and your mom are safe now, and we're going to make sure it stays that way." Sarah's gaze softened as she watched Emily reassure her son. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Emily smiled faintly. "This is what I do, but I couldn't have done it without you both." Hours later, a breakthrough came. The tech team uncovered a list of names and locations connected to the broker's smuggling operation. Each entry represented another step toward dismantling the network. Emily's eyes scanned the list, her determination renewed. "This is it," she said, holding up the decrypted files. "This is how we end it." Sarah stepped forward, her fear giving way to resolve. "What can I do to help?" Emily hesitated, but then nodded. "Your testimony about your husband's involvement could strengthen our case. It's dangerous, but it might be what we need to bring this network down." Sarah didn't waver. "I'll do it. For Leo and for everyone else they've hurt." As the precinct buzzed with activity, Emily couldn't shake the broker's parting words. She knew the fight wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt they had the upper hand. That night, as Sarah and Leo rested in a secure room with Scout by their side, Emily stood in the precinct's observation room, watching the broker through the one-way glass. The man sat calmly, his cold eyes betraying nothing. "This is just the beginning," Emily muttered to herself. But she knew one thing for sure: she wouldn't stop until every piece of this operation was dismantled, and Sarah and Leo could finally live in peace. By the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Karen's instincts kicked in immediately. "Stay here," she ordered Sarah, her voice firm but calm. She climbed the stairs, her weapon drawn, Shadow's growls intensifying as she reached the landing. In the dim light of the hallway, Karen spotted movement near Leo's room. A figure dressed in black and moving with calculated stealth was prying at the window. Without hesitation, Karen called out, "Police!" "Step away from the window." The intruder froze, then bolted toward the door. Shadow lunged, blocking the way, his growls turning into a fierce bark that sent a clear message. "You're not getting past me." Karen closed the distance in a heartbeat, her weapon trained on the intruder. "Down on the ground, now." The man hesitated, but then dropped to his knees, his hands raised. Karen secured him swiftly, her adrenaline pumping as she cuffed his hands behind his back. Shadow stood beside her, his gaze locked on the intruder, ready to act if necessary. "Leo, are you okay?" Karen called into the room. A small voice answered, trembling but steady. "I'm okay." Shadow wouldn't let him in. Karen exhaled in relief. "Good boy, Shadow," she said, giving the dog a quick pat before turning her attention back to the man. "Who sent you?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The intruder said nothing, his face a blank mask. Karen wasn't surprised. This wasn't someone who would talk easily. She escorted him downstairs, where Sarah was waiting with Leo, her arms protectively wrapped around her son. "What's going on?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with worry. "He's part of the broker's network," Karen said grimly. "They're trying to follow through on their plan, but we're one step ahead." Backup arrived moments later, officers taking the intruder into custody and securing the area. Karen knelt beside Leo and Shadow. "You were both so brave," she said, her tone softening. "We're going to keep you safe, I promise." Leo nodded, his small hand reaching out to pet Shadow. "Shadow saved me," he whispered. Karen stood, turning to Sarah. "This safe house is compromised. We're moving you to a secure location tonight. This time, they won't get close." Sarah nodded, her fear giving way to determination. "We trust you, Karen." As the family and Shadow were loaded into the convoy, Karen couldn't shake the weight of the discovery from earlier, the broker's reclamation protocol. This wasn't over, but every step forward brought them closer to dismantling his operation for good. Driving into the night, with Sarah and Leo safe for now, Karen vowed to end this fight once and for all. The broker had underestimated their resolve, but Karen knew this was only the beginning of the end. Shadow lay curled beside Leo, a silent guardian who had proven to be as loyal as he was brave. Together, they were ready for whatever came next. The precinct buzzed with activity as Officer Emily Hayes walked briskly through its halls, a folder of encrypted files clutched in her hand. The arrest of the broker, a ruthless mastermind behind an international smuggling ring, was a significant victory, but Emily knew the fight wasn't over. The information retrieved from the broker's servers revealed a sprawling network of corruption and crime, reaching far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Emily's heart weighed heavily as she glanced at the names in the files. The implications were chilling. Her tech specialist approached, holding a tablet. "Detective, there's something you need to see," he said, his voice low. Emily scanned the screen, her pulse quickening. "Reclamation protocol?" she muttered. The tech specialist nodded grimly. "It's a contingency plan." The broker anticipated his capture. This protocol involves targeting anyone connected to the investigation: witnesses, informants, even law enforcement. Emily's thoughts immediately turned to Sarah and Leo, the young boy clutching his loyal dog, Scout, just days ago at the safe house. They had already endured so much. Now, the danger loomed closer than ever. Meanwhile, at the safe house, Sarah sat beside Leo on the couch. Shadow, the ever-vigilant dog, lay at their feet, his ears twitching at every sound. The atmosphere was tense, despite the broker's arrest. Sarah's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Emily. "Sarah," Emily's voice was steady but urgent. "We've uncovered something. The broker's network might retaliate. Lock the doors and stay inside. I'm sending officers to reinforce your location." Sarah's heart sank. "Retaliate? What do you mean?" "There's a plan in motion." "I'm on my way," Emily replied, her voice firm before the call ended. As Sarah hung up, Shadow's growls drew her attention. His gaze was fixed on the window, his posture tense. Outside, the woods were eerily quiet, the silence broken only by the faint rustling of leaves. The officer stationed outside knocked on the door. "We've got movement in the woods," he said. "Stay inside and lock the doors." Sarah nodded, pulling Leo closer. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go to the living room," she said, her voice trembling. Shadow followed, his protective instincts heightened. Moments later, a loud crash shattered the silence. The back door burst open, and several masked intruders stormed in. "Get down!" Emily shouted, bursting into the room moments later, her weapon drawn. She positioned herself between the intruders and Sarah. Gunfire erupted, the deafening sound reverberating through the house. Shadow lunged at one of the intruders, sinking his teeth into the man's arm. Sarah grabbed Leo and shielded him behind the couch, her body trembling with fear. Emily moved with precision, her every shot calculated. "Stay down," she barked as the chaos intensified. An intruder grabbed Sarah, dragging her toward the door. Leo screamed, tears streaming down his face as he clung to Shadow. Emily didn't hesitate. She fired a precise shot, incapacitating the man and pulling Sarah back into the safety of the room. The sound of sirens grew louder, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. Realizing they were outmatched, the intruders fled into the woods. When the house fell silent, Emily lowered her weapon, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Officers flooded the scene, securing the area and tending to the wounded. Shadow, despite his injuries, stood guard beside Leo, his loyalty unwavering. Later at the precinct, Emily reviewed the data retrieved from the broker servers. The decrypted files revealed the extent of his operation, smuggling routes, financial transactions, and key players. Each connection brought Emily closer to dismantling the network for good. Her tech specialist approached. "We've pinpointed the nerve center of the operation," he said, showing her a map. "It's a heavily secured compound outside the city. If we strike now, we can take down the entire operation." Emily's jaw tightened. "Get the team ready. This ends tonight." Under the cover of darkness, Emily led her tactical team to the compound. The tension was palpable as they breached the perimeter, neutralizing guards with precision. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, the air thick with tension. Emily's heart raced as they advanced toward the control room. They found the broker's nerve center, a room filled with monitors and servers. Emily's tech specialist quickly began downloading files. "We've got it," he said. "This is the evidence we need." Suddenly, alarms blared. The broker's voice crackled through hidden speakers. "You think you've won, Detective Hayes? This is far from over." Emily's focus sharpened. "Secure the files and prepare to move," she ordered. As her team retreated, they encountered heavy resistance. A fierce firefight erupted, but Emily's determination never wavered. She spotted the broker in the chaos, barking orders from behind his guards. "Cover me!" Emily shouted, charging forward. She disarmed the guards with precision and cornered the broker. "It's over," she said, cuffing him. The broker smirked. "You've only delayed the inevitable." Back at the precinct, the broker was placed in custody and the files were analyzed. Emily stood in the observation room, watching him through the glass. She knew the fight wasn't over, but this victory was a turning point. Later, Sarah and Leo visited Emily. Shadow trotted beside them, his tail wagging. "Thank you," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave us hope when we thought there was none." Emily knelt beside Leo, ruffling Shadow's fur. "You're a brave kid. Don't ever forget that." As they left, Emily reflected on the journey. The world wasn't perfect, and the fight against injustice was ongoing. But in that moment, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had made a difference, and that was enough. The story of Officer Emily Hayes, Sarah, Leo, and Shadow resonates deeply with themes of resilience, courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice. In our current world, where challenges often feel insurmountable and fear can paralyze even the bravest of us, this tale serves as a powerful reminder of the strength that comes from standing up for what is right and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. It underscores the importance of trust, teamwork, and staying calm under pressure. Whether in the face of personal challenges or larger societal issues, Emily's unwavering determination shows that even in the darkest moments, hope and courage can prevail. From Sarah's perspective, the story is a testament to the enduring power of love and the lengths we go to protect our loved ones. Her willingness to face overwhelming fear and lean on the support of others illustrates the importance of community and connection. The bond between Leo and Shadow highlights the emotional comfort and strength we can find in the loyalty of animals, which reminds us of the unspoken trust they place in us as their guardians. In today's life, this story invites us to reflect on our own challenges and how we respond to adversity. Here are some practical lessons to apply. Be prepared and vigilant. Like Emily, preparation and awareness can help you navigate challenges. Whether it's creating a safety plan for your family or staying informed about potential risks, proactive measures can save lives. Lean on your support system. Don't hesitate to ask for help or rely on trusted individuals. Whether it's friends, family, or community resources, collective strength can overcome significant obstacles. Focus on what you can control. Sarah and Emily faced overwhelming odds, but concentrated on the actions within their power. Channel your energy into solutions rather than dwelling on what's beyond your control. Protect the vulnerable. Whether it's standing up for someone in need or advocating for a cause you believe in, small acts of bravery can make a huge difference. Resilience and hope. Challenges may seem relentless, but resilience comes from facing them head-on. Like Sarah and Leo, find comfort in moments of hope and the people or things that bring you strength. This story encourages us to embody these values in our daily lives, reminding us that we have the power to be heroes in our own narratives and for others in need. If this story inspired you, share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in Emily's place? Together, let's celebrate courage, resilience, and the power of doing what's right. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more incredible stories.